What if the tools designed to boost productivity, what if they are the very ones that are putting your organisation at risk? That's the uncomfortable question hanging over boardrooms right now, especially as generative AI continues to blur the lines between innovation and exposure. So today I'm going to be joined by Bradon Rogers, Chief Customer Officer at Island, and together we're going to unpack what's really happening beneath that AI hype. And with more than 25 years in cybersecurity and enterprise software, Bradon brings a clear-eyed view of the problems companies are sleepwalking into and the opportunities that they're still not seeing. And yet we will explore that growing challenge of shadow AI, not just the obvious tools like ChatGPT, but the quieter integration of AI into everyday business apps. And how most organisations don't realise that they now have dozens, maybe even hundreds of AI systems all operating inside their environment, often without governance, often without consent. And as Bradon will put it today, that it feels like shadow IT on steroids. But I don't want to just offer another doom and gloom story. It's not all risk. We will also talk about today the promise of AI-powered DLP and how the enterprise browser, a category Island has helped define, is emerging as a critical control point. It's a shift away from chasing data across apps and toward embedding governance right where the user works. Think of it as not banning AI, but building a more structured, sanctioned set of pathways for employees to use it responsibly. And yet we'll also touch on derivative data, new governance models, ambient user coaching, and why existing tools that were never designed for this kind of complexity need to be looked at. But we also ask that bigger question. Can security finally move from a reactive function to a proactive partner in business innovation? Feels like I've been talking about that for decades. So as AI becomes part of every workflow, are you building a system that understands your data? Or are you just hoping your legacy tools can keep up? Whatever it is, we're going to cover it all today in our conversation. So let me officially introduce you to today's guest now. So thank you for joining me on the podcast today. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, Neil, it's nice to be with you. I'm Bradon Rogers. I'm Chief Customer Officer with Island. In the role that I'm in at Island, anything that we do that touches the customer with the technology is my universe. So it's the pre-sales engineering work that we do with our systems engineers, the customer success work we do with deployments and support of the product as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me today. I know you are in the middle of a business trip as well, so thank you for taking the time out. One of the things that put you on my radar was when I was reading that you'd warned that AI will create a data nightmare for security teams. Tell me more about that and why are today's tools so unprepared for it? Because I think we scroll down our data feeds, everyone's getting excited about AI, but what are businesses unprepared for?
Well, AI is the ultimate shadow IT gold rush right now. If you think about it, everybody in the business side of the fence is aware of it. They've been playing with it themselves. They're hearing about their competitors potentially using it, and the business is driving the desire for competitive capabilities that give an edge, and it certainly could give it an edge in many industries. Along with that comes the end users themselves. There's a gold rush for the end users to want to try the cheat codes for work, so to make the life easier, and that's understandable. If I can find easier ways to perform my duties, and I said it's shadow IT. It's like shadow IT on steroids a bit because in the old days of shadow IT, when people would adopt apps, they would adopt new consumer-grade apps, but the pace wasn't quite what we see here. And because at the end of the day, the end user was simply searching for a way in shadow IT, just like today, a way to do their job easier. And then when we provided them viable alternatives for the apps, like, they would use personal Dropbox. And then when we came up with corporate OneDrive to make their job equally as effective, they went to the corporate standard. They weren't really generally trying to subvert the system. They were just trying to do something that was easier. Shadow IT on steroids with AI is just the average user's been tinkering with it with an exceptional pace. And then you add into the mix that your general application footprint is now encouraged for a similar fashion to leverage it for competitive advantage. So now you're starting to see the lines blurred between what is the app that you were using and where does AI begin and end in the process. And so organizations are having to wrestle with this quite a bit. And back to your question a moment ago, number one is it's making sure we have standardized ways to adopt and approach the appropriate environments for our users and give them easy paths to be able to have accessibility of these toolings. At the same time, there is the risk of derivative forms of our data, because you think about it, if you go back to the days of DLP, as we've been using DLP for 20 years, a lot of organizations struggled with DLP. They continue to struggle with DLP. And it's the age-old issue of it feels like you're a bit like a dog chasing its tail. And it just continues to chase. And the dilemma is that the data is always slightly out of your reach. Some of the data is in your reach and some of it's out of your reach. And some of it's out of your reach is the derivative forms of it. It's the things that change, live and breathe, the physician's notes that live in a field. Those are unstructured types of data. And you start thinking about the world of AI, its ability to produce derivative forms of data with different semantics, different verbiage, but that say all the same thing. All of a sudden, my DLP that I was once dependent on that was already struggling with structured data, it becomes even more difficult with the unstructured data. So that derivative form data is something interesting and worth watching, because it definitely starts leaning into the data protection technologies to be much more adept at dealing with unstructured data.
You made so many great points there, and I was getting flashbacks from those shadow IT days where so many different users throughout the organization were using things like Dropbox and Slack and so many other different tools that were coming under the radar. And as you said, it's users looking for that cheat code, but AI is that on steroids, and many of the users are blissfully unaware of the dangers of putting, corporate data through a machine learning algorithm that other businesses are going to be using as well. And of course, as more unstructured data floods from generative AI tools, how should IT and privacy leaders rethink their protection strategies? Because straight off the bat, a couple of years ago, every business just kind of went, oh, we're banning this. But I think they're waking up to the fact now they can't ban it. It's not going anywhere, but we do need to rethink things and maybe have a different mindset towards this. But what should they be doing?
Well, I think we have to think about the structures by which we use to control the data, first of all.
Yeah.
Or better yet, the approaches. Let's think of the methodology we traditionally approached it with. And this is coming from somebody who's worked with DLP for 20 years now. And many times the approaches that we would take would be very data centric. Now, that's going to sound kind of weird to say. You're talking about data protection. It's going to be data centric. Well, when you're in the chase for the data will always outrun you, because the data is living and breathing every single day, as I mentioned a moment ago. So it changes constantly. Now, there will be some things that will be fixed, and that's where the approach to chasing the data will work with structured data, as I talked about before. But the constructs we have to think about are vehicles by which we start thinking about where our data is held. And our data oftentimes is being held, a big chunk of at least the user data is being held inside the applications. So what if we could rethink structures that would be application centric? Let us build simple policies that have the users, provision the user's capability to be able to fluidly move data across applications within a certain corporate boundary. So the user could freely move data across my internal apps, across my SaaS apps, and freely, copy and paste or move files, et cetera. But when the user tries to, access something like ChatGPT, the unsanctioned version, or maybe a sanctioned version of a generative AI resource, they're not allowed to the personal to move the data, but within the construct of the corporate tenant of service XYZ, they are allowed to do that. So I think we have to start thinking more, if we're going to deal with unstructured data flooding in our environment, which is already a problem before generative AI, we have to think of how we deal with unstructured data with vehicles that maybe approach the structure differently, I guess. And, I think for me, there's one side of the spectrum is attacking the data, which we've seen kind of fail over and over again. The other side is maybe going and attacking it from an app perspective and then working our way back into the data once we get the data controlled inside the corporate application footprint.
And refreshingly, I was also reading, you said AI, rather than ban it, it might actually be the cure for the very problems that it is creating. So how close are we seeing AI-powered DLP or data loss prevention actually working at scale in enterprises? Are we nearly there?
Yeah, well, we've still got a long way to go, but there are a lot. I mean, there's certainly every major data protection technology provider is spending resources on figuring out how AI can be used as an advantage in their own platforms, and it certainly could be. I don't want to call it a panacea because I'm not sure that when humans are involved, humans will make mistakes, and a lot of times humans will outsmart even the smartest technologies with simple mistakes. But at the end of the day, we have to have something that can move at AI speed because that's oftentimes what we're dealing with on the other end. And so at the end of the day, I'd say that anybody that's in the data protection business today would be foolish if they're not considering how AI can be used as a tactical advantage and be able to govern unstructured data within the application usage.
And looking back, I think traditional DLP has struggled with things like accuracy and false positives. So what role do you see AI playing in maybe helping boost precision, but without overwhelming teams?
Well, certainly, AI could be very effective, especially when trained appropriately. And that's one of the value propositions of the appropriate usage of AI in your environment, sanctioned usage of AI. You take the models that you're adopting in the various application services and you train it on your own materials. That could be on your own internal records, your own documentation, your own code resources, and it becomes intelligent to how your own people speak, live, and breathe. And once it understands the context of your business, the potential for it to be applied more effectively against the world of the unstructured that we're talking about will certainly have the potential to reduce false positives. And then one thing we should always be able to do and be willing to do is engage the factors we have in our environment with our enterprise workflows. And our enterprise workflows might involve just the end user in coaching the end user. When you see something, are you sure you want to send this? Here's what we're seeing within this material. And one of the things we think is very important is being able to approach the end user in a very ambient way that's non-threatening, by controlling the presentation layer and presenting a simple dialogue to them and explaining to them what they're engaging and why the nature of it could be something that's concerning. Or again, enterprise workflows, tying, many of the common things that might need exceptions or might create false positives, tying those into things like ticketing environments, like with your ServiceNow environments or your Jira environments, and letting natural workflows that you've already got built for approvals take care of themselves by the business level approvers without having to involve frontline decision makers, fixing either false positives or the false negatives every single time in the process. And we should also obviously learn from those workflows to become better.
And I think for many people listening, the rise of embedded AI features in those everyday apps will sound like a new breed of shadow IT. And I would say exactly what you said earlier. It's almost shadow IT on steroids. But how can companies realistically get a handle on this right now?
Well, I think there's certainly an important part of understanding your supply chain and your application usage. So getting visibility of what the apps that people are using is very important. I think we're in a very naive position to think that the application providers that we work with won't all at some point be leveraging some form of AI, whether it looks like AI or not. Sometimes it will look like a very clear generative AI box, and sometimes it will be a button inside of an application that's leveraging AI behind the scenes. But at the end of the day, we'd be naive to think that's not going to be a part of our everyday work. And again, I think going back to the conversation I had earlier is building structure around the core applications and understanding what's in those core applications is really important. At the end of the day, our core applications of things like Office 365 and our G Suite universes and, things like Salesforce and other things, they're going to they already do inherently have AI capabilities built into them. So we have to leverage their controls in the back end to either enable or disable them. Some of those, like Copilot, can be turned on and off for audiences of users. You can control that in your Microsoft licensing, et cetera. In other places, you won't have the control over it, and you have to use constructs, like I talked about with things like application boundaries, just to say, you know what, that's our sanctioned application, and that's the sanctioned environment and the place where the data was held before. And you'll have to understand with your application providers how they're using your data. Are they using their data to train other models and other customers' environments? And is it a shared ecosystem, or is it just for your own usage in the environment? And once you understand those, you can safely say, that's a sanctioned environment for my own use. And you may find something that's uncomfortable for you, and you say, we can't use that app anymore. I have to go to this alternative path. And there'll be certain decisions that orgs make based on these types of discussions we're having here.
And in your role at Ireland, from all the conversations you're having, not only with your customers, but on the show floor of tech events, I know you're at a work event today. Are there any patterns that you're seeing across customer environments, especially when it comes to AI adoption and governance and both the challenges and opportunities that come with that? Are there any trends?
Well, I definitely see we're still in the early cycles of a lot of organizations figuring out the impact, the business level impact for themselves, and how where the competitive advantage could be. There are definitely orgs with development teams that have been building this into their own services, into manufacturing and other places, for better efficiencies in the environment as well. But I definitely think that right now, especially for the end user side of the house, orgs are still wrestling with this, and you often see orgs getting surprised by suddenly an AI generative AI box will pop up into an application they weren't expecting, and it's one of their core applications. They have to decide how they go manage that and deal with it. But I think at the end of the day, there's still a lot of easier black and white in some areas right now. Your core sanctioned apps, they're going to be there, and you're just starting to accept that. But there's also areas that go way outside the lines, and that's where your unsanctioned world lives. And in my world of Island right now, we're seeing orgs just create some clear black and white lines between some things. The broader categories of generative AI technologies, they're often off limits, and obviously govern people in shepherding back to the sanctioned environment. So one of the core things we do is by controlling the presentation layer of the application usage. When someone goes to the wrong environment, we gracefully glide them back and kind of nudge them back, kind of like sheep with a shepherd, sheepdog, being just gently nudged back into the direction we want you to go. And the users usually, when nudged in that direction, when they know there's an alternative path that's viable or that's acceptable, they usually take the acceptable path. That often they just don't know about it. And so that's what most of the orgs are dealing with now is how do I shepherd my users back to the sanctioned environments as we continue to grapple with how the org adopts it. And at the end of the day, just don't, what I think the big negative for a lot of orgs is putting the big sledgehammer on all of it to the point where the user doesn't have an outlet. Because when the user doesn't have an outlet, they'll often go find their own outlet in the process to make their job easier.
They really will. And as we record this podcast today, we're in the third year since generative AI first arrived. So many big changes since then. We're kind of coming out the hype now. We're starting to see a little bit of maturity. But if we do dare look another, 3 to 5 years ahead, do you think most security leaders will still be playing catch up, or will we see maybe a new model emerge of proactive AI data governance or anything else? How do you see this playing out?
Well, I definitely think the speed at which AI is moving right now will force organizations to move at that same pace to keep up. Meaning the technology evolves. I mean, think about it. What are we 2.5 years into this right now? When we first chat, something like that, February of 2.5 years ago, we saw ChatGPT hit the horizon. Even though people have been working on generative AI and AI technologies for years before, but it kind of hit the forefront with that. That speed by which that happened, and now you see the industry, you go to something like RSA. That's all everybody talked about at the show is, things like agentic AI and, other buzzwords that are associated with it. And, 5 years, that is like 100 years in AI speed, I would imagine, at the end of the day. So I think we'll see that as just a normal part of everyday life and many of the applications and services we use. I think the users will be leveraging it at the end of the day all over the place for their own productivity. I think organizations will be asserting vehicles to automate common user workflows where things that happen in like call centers, a call center worker that's mundanely doing this all day long, leveraging technology like AI to recognize common patterns and then give them workflows that automate many of those common things they're having to do to make them faster at their jobs, and then be able to give us measurability on the back end about how those improvements mattered to the org or made a difference in the org in terms of ROI, whether it's time or money or whatever. But I think 5 years is a long, long time to look into the future, but I think it's kind of becomes a bit of the norm of how we're all working in many of the common toolings and technologies we use at the end of the day.
And talking about how we're all working and how that is all changing, I recently saw Mark Templeton, the visionary known for his work at Citrix, take to the stage. It was at iGel's Now and Next conference in Miami, and he declared that the browser is now the computer, which is a tipping of the hat moment and a clever updating of the old Sun Microsystems historic mantra, the network is the computer, because now it was something like 80-90% of people now do all of their work through the browser. And of course, we've been using browsers for decades, but they weren't designed to handle enterprises' complex security and productivity demands. It's more of a Swiss Army knife, great for general use, but not specialised tasks. And the reason I bring this up at the end of our conversation today is I know at Ireland you're very passionate about this new enterprise browser. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how that differs from the traditional consumer browsers that they might be using?
Yeah, 100%. So the consumer browser is a great piece of technology. I use one every single day. A lot of people use them all the time. I mean, everybody, millions of people around the globe use them. And the purpose they have to serve is a wildly different purpose than the practitioners and the orgs we live in and we work within every single day, than the missions they have to serve. And, it's ironic. I'm actually in Daytona right now, Daytona, Florida, and there's a big race here every year, the Daytona 500. And I use a parallel that I use quite often in the usage of automobiles. A family sedan is quite different than a race car. And you're not going to hop up on the Daytona 500 in the family sedan and win the race, most likely. And you're probably not even going to try because it's built for a different purpose. In the same way, you're not going to take the NASCAR car or the Indy car or the Formula One car out on a family vacation. They're just built for two different purposes. And so one of the things we find really unique about the context of the enterprise browser, it is the place where people work. The browser is already where people work. People already are familiar with the interface. So why not leverage the familiarity of that interface to the comment that was made, at the Agile conference a little while ago. That is the new place where the compute happens. So at the end of the day, if that's the tip of the spear, why not assert our will inside of the mechanics of that vehicle and transform it and turn that familiar experience into something that benefits the enterprise? And that's what we did when we invented the enterprise browser. We decided, at the end of the day, the browser has an immense amount of potential that could be uncorked for the enterprises that use it every single day. And we transformed the browser into a true application delivery platform. And by being an application delivery platform, it is the convergence of where the users engage and they work with the applications, whether they're apps sitting up in a virtualized environment like AVD or a full virtual desktop like Windows 365 or SaaS apps or internal apps. But those apps all converge into the enterprise browser. And then if the user is going to be working there, why not at the tip of the spear make sure everything's safe? Why not at the tip of the spear make sure that workers are more productive in their jobs and automate common, elements of their work? Why not give them productivity tooling to make their jobs easier in the process? Why not leverage the mechanics of the browser to simplify the infrastructure that we're deploying to support applications in the process and all the back end stuff we have to do for networking, the VPNs and things like that, or elimination or simplified, reduction of things like VDI. At the end of the day, why not give the user a very familiar environment that just they don't have to be trained on? So it all converges in a very, very unique place that the great part about this is it's a great place where everybody's been trained for 20 plus years now in the usage of a browser. So it's a really, really fun thing to be able to work on every single day. And I get blessed to show it to people for the first time all the time and watch light bulbs go off.
Wow, I think that's a powerful moment to end on. But before I do let you go, we have a bit of a tradition on here where I ask my guests to leave either a book that means something to them that we can add to our Amazon wish list, or a song that we can add to our Spotify playlist. Guilty pleasures are allowed. It is an eclectic mix over there. But what would you like to leave and why? I'm kind of curious here, because you have flown in from Florida. You flown into Florida today, so there was probably some big noise-cancelling headphones there. What are you going with?
Well, ironically, I do have some headphones here, my AirPods sitting right in front of me. You make the mistake of asking a music person, a person that's obsessed with music, about their favorite songs. And I listen to music. I read the lyrics of songs. I play music myself. So I play a lot of different instruments. I have fun with it. And that's a really hard one. I definitely want to add something to your playlist. I'm going to cheat in this one. I'm going to let you pick one of two later to add to your playlist, but I'll give you two songs that just blow me away. One that I just found a couple of years ago by a guy named Daryl Scott. Many people may not have heard of him. He wrote a song called A Crooked Road, and it sounds a lot like the Blackbird by the Beatles. It literally sounds very, very familiar. But the song is about, how life's path is rarely a straight road. It's rarely an easy road. And a lot of times the road in front of us looks kind of crooked. And there's lots of things that can get in the way and unexpected turns. And one of the lines is, and only when I'm looking back, I see the straight and narrow. I see the straight and narrow and I walk a crooked road. So you can look back and realize some of the things you thought were really hard in front of me probably weren't that hard. They just looked like it up front. And if you just push through them, on the other end, you get to your destination. And, even though something may have felt chaotic at the time. So that's my first. I'm going to give you a second and let your audience figure this out. Guy named Steven Wilson Jr. I've been listening to this song lately a lot. He did a cover of Stand By Me, the old Benny King song. Great one is, and you can find it on Spotify. It's Live at the Print Shop. The Live at the Print Shop version is really good because he pulls out a classic guitar with nylon strings and the old Willie Nelson style. And I will tell you, he's got a voice that sounds powerful like Chris Stapleton. And if you go watch the YouTube video of it, you'll see a book that doesn't match its cover. Because when you see this guy, you're going, how does that voice come out of that body? And it's like, it's effortless. And it just, I don't know, the song Stand By Me is pretty incredible, especially when he does it, because he's got this kind of little bit of darkness to it, because the song's got a lot of darkness to it. And then obviously, stand by me through the darkness, and, when the nights come and the land is dark, all that kind of stuff. So it's a great song. So I'll let you pick your poison on one of those two to add to your playlist. So, but anyway, there's a fun.
Oh man, how could I choose between those two? They're both going on now, man. You set the scene beautifully. It'd be criminal of me not to put them both on there. For anyone listening wanting to find out more information about Ireland, the conversation we had around AI, enterprise browsers, what's the best starting point for everything?
Well, you can certainly go to our website, island.io. It's a great place, a lot of great resources, the papers and blogs and other stuff to learn about the category of enterprise browser and the work that we're doing. Certainly, if you'd like to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'll gladly engage you there and help you learn more and get you connected to the right people as well. But and there's plenty of places on the website as well to just do general outreach, and the local teams can engage you as well. And by the way, we're appearing at all your major shows, et cetera. So just go look us up, and we will generally have a presence at all the the requisite shows that you'll see many of the other players. So.
Well, I am in the US for a lot of tech conferences, so hopefully me and you can meet personally as well on the show floor. Maybe have a chat on the show floor, but I'll add links to everything that you mentioned there to make it easy for everyone listening. But more than anything, just thank you for sitting down with me today.
Awesome, Neil. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
I think one of the things I appreciated most about this conversation with Bradon, with his ability to cut through both the panic and all the marketing fluff, is that he's not afraid to call out where legacy thinking is failing. But equally, he's optimistic if we're willing to change how we think about control, that is. And I think he offered a timely reminder that AI is not just another tech trend, it is a catalyst for re-evaluating everything from how we structure enterprise applications to how we train our people. And the traditional data-first approach isn't enough anymore. It's time to focus on application boundaries, user experience, and context-aware decision-making. And here's my personal big takeaway. Security leaders can no longer afford to chase the data. That game is over. The real opportunity lies in guiding users gently, intelligently, and in real time towards trusted environments. Because if you don't offer a sanctioned path, users will find their own. And that, my friends, is where the real risk lives. So, over to you. How are you redesigning trust in an age of embedded AI? And what would it take for your security strategy to not be seen as a blocker by the rest of the organisation, but more of a driver of business confidence? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'd love to hear how you're tackling this shift. LinkedIn at Neil C. Hughes. X, Instagram, TikTok at Neil C. Hughes too. Easiest guy in the world to find. So keep your messages coming in, and I'll be back before you know it with another guest. So speak with you all then.